Welcome back to Ricecracker Renovations. Now that we're in the new house, we're ready for more projects, but we need an appropriate workspace. So let's move to our workshop and let's start building some workbenches that we can work on. I started with design work. I downloaded an iPad app called Shaper 3D and I measured up the space with a tape measure that I wanted to build my workbench. Then, using the Shaper 3D CAD software on my iPad, I designed up the workbench so I knew the size of wood I needed and roughly the shape of the bench until I was very happy with it. And then I kind of wrote up my cut list so I could go buy the wood. I made trips to both Home Depot and Menards and I bought the 2x4s that I needed. I laid them up in my workbench in the basement, my sawbuck workbench, and I glued them together, and then I used some bar clamps and 2x4s so I could clamp it all together so I had one type of tabletop. But I actually needed two of these, so I had to do it twice. Next, I had to measure up on my 4x4s the cuts I was going to make and trace it all over from top to bottom. I use a dado stack on my table saw to cut this all out. All right, we got workbench table number 2, work table number 1, and then we got our 8 21-inch 2x6s, and then we got our cool dadoed out 4 4x4s or 6 4x4 supports, and then you can see our 2x6s that can go, and we got our top and bottom 2x6 over there, top and bottom 2x6 over here that are notched out. Now I need to notch the top and bottom 8 foot 2x6s on each side to mate with the 24-inch 2x6s, and then we will have a workbench frame, and we gotta mill those, and then we will have tabletops. Using my jigsaw, I cut the notches out of my 2x6s. This is a leveling feet I bought off of McMaster-Carr. I trusted this more than trying to get some precision cut to get all 4 legs exactly right. This allows me some fine adjustment. Now it's time to run lag bolts through the 2x6s and into the 4x4s to make sure everything's nice and together. We're not even close to being done, but I'm mocking up the tabletop to see what it looks like on the frame, with the frame in its final position. As I did not own a planer at this time, I was trying to figure out how I could make my tabletop flat. So I built a router sled so I could use it like a milling machine to flatten out the top. We used some angle iron to build our slide and we waxed up the middle piece. I had to make that adapter to make the router fit on the router sled how I needed it.
Adjusting the depth.
As this was our very first time trying out this router sled, we were not sure how much to mill off in each pass, so we were kind of putzing around trying to figure out all the settings. We don't have any more hearing protection, do we?
I bought one because I always need them.
Yeah, this is the first time I've wanted one. For my first trial, I was really impressed with how this was working. Aside from seriously needing some hearing protection, it was working out quite well from a milling perspective. What I didn't know is that the handle for the router on the opposite side of me started to loosen up and I could not see it from where I was standing. But my wife saw it coming. The handle ends up vibrating itself free and the washers and nuts fall into the blade, making the teeth on the blade explode. Nobody was injured, but it was certainly scary. But it made a nice cut at the end. I ended up ordering another 3-inch router fly cutter so we could keep working, and with everything set up and proper hearing protection, it went really well for the rest of this project, although I was scared for a little while. Here you can see the crown in the before and how flat it is after. Here we have a good time-lapse video showing the material being removed, because I did this in multiple passes, removing a small amount of material in each pass. You can actually see how much of the wood chips are coming off with each pass. It really starts building up on the ground and off to the side. But I do verify that everything's level, everything's square, and I just keep going even though it's quite the mess. But the results were excellent. Because we had to do this for such long periods of time, the router got really hot, so I had to take breaks and put it in front of a fan to cool down. Well, the first table is completely done being router sled. Both sides are nice and flat and smooth. This definitely needs more sanding. I did one round of sanding on it, and it's gonna need a second, but it's looking nice and flat. A little bit more sanding. Hey, baby. I do realize I technically did not have to do both sides of the wood. I could have done just the top and left the bottom crown as it naturally comes, But I was experimenting with my new toy, and I wanted it flat so it would sit flat on the frame I built, and I wouldn't have to worry as much about shimming and everything to make sure the countertop was as flat as I wanted at its mounting point. At this point, we had a good rhythm going. I was working on one side on the router sled, milling off the material for flatness, and my wife, Rice, was working with the belt sander to help kind of flatten out all the grooves and issues that are kind of caused. You get kind of like tooling paths like you'd see in machining with using the router sled. So she's really cleaning it up in between. Sometimes, though, she'd have to wait for her batteries to charge because foolishly we had battery sanders when we should have corded sanders. Here you can see the front edge is square when you should have a chamfered countertop edge, so we ran the router along that with a chamfer bit and got a nice edge. Next stop is making sure everything's level for our middle boards, and then we could install the countertop. We screwed it in from the bottom, and then we gave it a polyurethane hardened protective coat on the top. Here it is, all sanded and router sledded together. 3 coats of a polyurethane protective top coat. It's beautiful. Individual 2x4s. Looks cool. I love all the knot characters in it. I understand that using pine to make a countertop workbench probably isn't ideal. It's a softer wood. It can get dinged up and damaged. But I used the tall side. I had 3.5 inches. I mean, minus what I milled off with my router sled. But if the countertop ever gets too dinged up, I can give it a little bit of sand. If it gets really dinged up, I kept my router sled so I can fixture it up and kind of take a little bit off the top, hit it again with some poly coat, and I have a nice brand new countertop ready to go. But I have my workbench done, but I'm not done with building space in my basement. Now I need an island to work off for other projects in the middle of the room. We're building our workbench. Here's Ghost and my trusty steed. We're gonna get some 4x4s for the legs, some 2x6s for the framing and the top. When shopping for wood, you'll see people look down the end and check both sides. You want the board to be straight. Doesn't matter when it's flat like this, you're more focused on the edge. You'll often see a slight curve like a banana because they warp when shipping. What you want to avoid is a twist. This is just slightly bananaed. It's not a big deal, so it's a good piece of wood. It's nice to have a truck. I got all my 2x6s and 4x4s loaded up. I sold my wagon, so I had a utility vehicle for our projects with my buddy. Hey, buddy! Yeah! No expression, hey, buddy! There's a tail! All right, this is my workshop. It's a bit of a mess. I did install all the lighting. I built this nice big workbench. I'm gonna build a workbench similar to this with 2x6s notched into 4x4s with leveling feet at the bottom of it. But this one, it's a huge mess, by the way. I took 2x4, stood them on end, and I built a sled that I could use. I think it's called a router sled. It allows me to kind of mill the top to make it flat. I'm going to do it differently. So I'm going to cut these to size and notch them to fit my 2x6s inside. Here are the 2x6s in there, but I'm going to run these through a planer to square them flat, and I'm going to either dowel or biscuit joint the ends. And with that done, instead of using lag bolts like I used in here, I'm going to use these dowels, and I'm going to hammer and glue them in so there'll be no hardware. And this should look kind of neat at that point. There's no general purpose for it. It's just what I want. And I'll put the workbench in this area right here. Eventually I'll put drawers in it, so there will be hardware in it. I really don't need to, I have lag bolts. I just think it's cool to try dowels. All right, I just marked up my posts here. These are gonna be my legs. They're a little extra long, longer than they need to be. I'll cut like an inch or two off the bottom once I'm done and said. But if you can see here, I traced out the notches in both sides and how I want them to be. So how it's gonna look when it's done on all 4 corners. Now I'm setting on my table saw. I get my fence set to the maximum cut, and then I'm just gonna use my miter gauge to help slide the part back and forth across the dado blade. It would be easier with a bandsaw, but I don't have a bandsaw, so I'm doing it with this. So I have a dado stack in over here. I'm doing, I think, 3/4 inch cuts, so I'm starting to hog out this material that I have marked up. At this point, it's just kind of rinse and repeat. So I just need to keep doing this to get all the boards done. In the future, I do hope to get a bandsaw in my workshop because that'll help me out on a lot of different projects. I am building this to replace this sawbucks with a tabletop on it that I've been working on. And after that, I got to rebuild that guy because that's also sawbucks, but instead of the tabletop, it's some 2x12s. Be more of that workbench. Here are the legs for the bottom brace and the top brace for the 2x6s, cut on the table saw. Here you can see the fitment. It almost looks gappy, but it's not. It's because I have this board at an angle, but it's firm, it's snug. So it fits up there and it fits here, nice and snug fit as I want it. I have all the framing boards notched. I have the legs all notched. Up next is my tabletop. So I have my tabletop boards, my 2x6s, but because they are radiused, I'm going to use a planer to flatten them out. I could use a table saw and cut off some of the ends, but just to make sure it's flattered and flat, I'm going to run them all through the planer and get a nice uniform thickness. Planer footage is not always the most exciting footage, and I actually have a shocking amount of this footage. But you can see I'd flip the boards back and forth and run it through there to make sure I'm getting the right flatness on both sides. All of my toppers are planed down. So now when I start gluing them together, they have a nice sharp corner. It'd be better if I had a joiner so I could make sure that was square, but I don't. So I'm sure it's not going to be perfect. And here is my, here's one end of it. So when I built this bench, I used leg bolts to hold everything together. I thought it'd be fun this time to use dowels, just to do something different. So it's all just basic pine, but then these are oak dowels. So I got them pounded through and I'll flush cut them when they're done. And this end, flush cut them, and then I gotta do the other end, and then I can do the size. There's two. There's one in each here. I gotta do another one over there, but I'm gonna let this dry before I hack it off and let go of the clamps. But it's square. I've already checked that this is square. I ordered these off a McMaster car, so it's a nice heavy load-bearing foot, and I can thread this up and down to make sure that this table is nice and level, and I can lock nut it in here with the jam nut. I forgot to film that, but all you got to do is drill a hole in here, punch this in with a hammer. That's your threaded knurl, and then you can lock nut it on there. Well, it's not really knurl, but yeah, you get what I'm saying. And here's the feet on these two legs, so that's the other side of the table. But it's not the best work I've ever done, but it'll be a fun table and it'll work. I got this whole thing I need some more dowels to put in here. I need one more on the bottom on each side. But I got my little flush cut saw. When I come in here, I gotta take the clamps off, but I'll come in there and I'll just kind of hacksaw it away to flush cut it up. This is the second bench area. This guy's all done up. I didn't really show much of this progress, so I'll show it on this guy. But what I'm going to do is I've already marked, I've clamped this thing down. I've marked where I want to do my dowels. I got a 1/2-inch drill bit. I got my 1/2-inch dowels down there. So I'm gonna go through here, pound them all in, or drill out the holes, and then I'll put some tight bond onto the dowels and I'll pound them in. I did not glue any of the other joints, so just the wood-on-wood joints, the notch joints. There's no metal fasteners in this whole thing, and the glue is just between the dowel going into the hole and the corresponding areas. Again, there was no advantage to not using fasteners. I just wanted to do it as a craftsmanship thing. Although this is not like the height of craftsmanship, but it was a fun project for me that I enjoyed. I have it all doweled in and assembled. So it's just glued up now. You can see I make sure it pokes out the bottom. So when I'm done, I'll flush cut the top and the bottom. But now I just gotta let the glue cure, and I'm ready to go to town. Here you can see the first one I did with the flush cut joints and everything like that. The rest of this isn't the prettiest craftsmanship ever, but that was just for fun. My last bench, I use leg bolts, and it works fine, but I thought this would look cool and different, although my joints were tied together better on the last bench. This one's gonna be a bit sloppier. I know I'm repeating myself some, but this video was done years ago and over a long period of time. But I have the frame put together. Now I'm flush cutting the top.
I skipped a couple steps, but we're almost ready for, or we are ready for the tabletop now. So all the dowels are in, cut and smoothed out. I've added these two middle supports to make sure this is as strong in the middle as possible. Again, I did this with dowels. Sometimes I think maybe I should have notched this out and let this cantilever on here and then anchored it in. But I don't know. I think the 2x6s across the top are probably strong enough, and this is just a little extra support. You can see my leveling feet. I did cross-check this thing, and this thing is perfectly square. So, yeah, it's looking close. Now I'm going to cover it with paper, and I'm going to stack the boards up, and I'm going to try to biscuit join them, and then we're going to belt sand the whole top smooth.
The paper on top is just to keep the glue from getting all over the workbench, so it's a place for me to start. And the extra boards are to prevent the wood from walking in weird directions while it's curing.
So right now we are doing, hey Ghosty, we are doing the table. I've added biscuit joints. I didn't film any of that stuff, but I drew lines. I squared the whole table up. I drew lines across the whole thing. And then I did biscuit joints in all the sides. So this way I can biscuit join this whole thing together and glue them end to end and use a crap load of bar clamps and squeeze this whole thing together. Once it's all glued up and done, my wife's gonna help me with our daughter Aria, and we're gonna cut the ends off and bolt it to the table. Well, dowel it to the table.
So with my wife's help, and she's got our newborn baby, well, not newborn, but our baby Aria and her Nunya on her back, we are adding glue into the biscuits on both sides, and then we are also putting glue on the end using a glue roller to spread out the glue and move it all around, rolling them. And then we're gonna put them face down, line up the marks that I already made. And then as you can see, we're starting to clamp it together. And then the 2x4s on top and bottom, I'm gonna use to clamp down and to kind of pinch everything together to make sure it stays as flat as possible. And this should give us the best result in the end.
All right, it's all clamped up and glued up and biscuited up and drying. It's not gonna be a perfect bench, but it'll be good enough for what we need it for. It should be kind of cool when it's done. Enough clamps on here and straight edges, and the ends are gonna get cut off, so I'm less concerned about that. And some of this looks good. I mean, there'll be some little tiny gaps, but that's not gonna affect its functionality.
So I let it cure for a day, and then I was ready to rip it all apart, and I can cut it down to size now.
All right, so tabletop, I got all the boards off of it. It's all glued together. The next step here is going to be anchoring it to the table, and then I'm going to cut it to size, and then I'm going to belt sand it. You can see I already have it just anchored down. I could have put 2 screws in, but I decided to just hold it like this. It's nice and solid. I've measured, I have 1 inch gap on both sides, so that's done. So I actually thought I'd be cutting all 4 sides, but it turns out I'll just be cutting 2 sides. And then I'll dowel this thing in, but I'm gonna dowel it in first.
Ha! I say I was gonna dowel it in first as you see me in the next scene cut the ends off, but whatever. Change your mind sometimes. I put down some tape on my cut mark just to try to prevent the ends from fraying and burring as I cut through them. I'm making all my measurements to make sure everything's right, and I'm, it's like measure twice, cut once. And I get my fence set up, and then I'm ready to rip right through it. Keeping everything clamped down, I drilled through again with my 1/2-inch drill bit and pounded in my oak dowels, put some glue in there, and then I was ready to come back with the flush cut saw and cut it down. Our daughter Aria was playing foreman and checking quality control.
If you have time today, use the flush cut saw and cut that one, and that one. Sand them in the drill press just a bit and glue these 3 in. If you do it in the morning, this afternoon, we can cut all this off and do a gentle belt sand on the table.
As said, we just had to wrap it up with a little bit of belt sanding, and then it was ready to be used for art projects and anything else we wanted it for. It has been over a year, almost 2 years, since we finished that project. The tabletop works great, or I should say the island works great. Both the bench and the island are great. Originally, I wanted to build them at the exact same height so I could actually move the island over to the workbench, but I didn't plan the workbench height quite appropriately. I made it like countertop height, which is what you'd find in the kitchen for more ergonomics and comfort. But later on, I figured for the island, I should make it the same height as my table saw. so I can push product right off my table saw onto the workbench. So that is what I did. It works well. We use the workbench for all kinds of projects not every day, but all the time to this day. I did it without hardware, without the metal screws, lag bolts, everything like that. It didn't need to be. It's not better or worse. It was just a fun project I wanted to try to do. I really appreciate Japanese woodworking, and not just Japanese, but all really high-end woodworking with the joinery that they do, all with wood and dowels and shims and wedges, and it's just really impressive stuff. So while my skill is nowhere near their skill, I wanted to do it just to try and do it and to see what it'd be like and for the fun. So I really am happy with the way I built that. In fact, I kind of wish I did that with the original long workbench, but whatever. Projects go on, they never end. It is fun. I'm really happy with it. I have yet to make one more workbench. Like I said, it's been almost 2 years since the island was made, and I need to make another one going along that outer wall by my window for my chop miter saw, my compound miter saw. I'm slowly getting there, slowly getting my workshop. I really need to clean and organize it, but at least I have a functional workspace. So I started this with no countertops, and I was just building off of sawbucks. And now I have 2 highly functional tables that I really love, 1 more to go. But since we did this project, we have done a couple other projects, and I'll touch base on those in the next history videos. If you like the content on this channel, please like and subscribe. If you want to know more about the house projects and renovations, please leave a comment down below and I'll answer you. Thank you.